This is how we usually remember 2007. Steve Jobs standing on a stage in San Francisco, seemingly conjuring the modern smartphone out of pure imagination. It's a comforting story. We have a cultural obsession with the lone innovator, the idea that breakthroughs are the result of an isolated effort, where a single person sees a future no one else can. But back in 2004, the atmosphere inside Apple was defined by a much more grounded emotion: corporate terror. The iPhone project was greenlit strictly as a defensive maneuver, a desperate attempt to protect Apple's existing profits from a shifting market. In the mid-2000s, the iPod was Apple's foundational revenue engine. It accounted for roughly half of the company's total income, making its continued success a matter of survival. Phil Schiller and the leadership team saw a threat on the horizon. Mobile phones were becoming increasingly capable, and Schiller warned that soon every phone would have a built-in music player. As he put it, "Phones are going to eat our lunch." This is a chart of Apple's revenue. This massive block represents the iPod. The threat they faced is market cannibalization, a new product category emerging to swallow their primary income. This happens when a new product effectively destroys the original. To survive, Apple realized they had to build their own phone and attack their own iPod sales before a rival did it for them. This means the most significant consumer product of the century didn't start with a vision of progress, but as a calculated effort to stay alive in a changing industry. Apple's first strategy was reactive. Rather than trying to build unproven hardware themselves, they partnered with a telecommunications giant that already dominated the market. The industry spent months speculating about a phone that would finally integrate Apple software. Rumors in magazines like this one suggested the iTunes Mobile was just around the corner. The result was the Motorola RKR E1. It was a clunky silver handset with a dedicated music button that launched a severely limited, cramped version of the iTunes interface. When Jobs unveiled the device in late 2005, his frustration was visible. The phone was slow, ugly, and could only hold 100 songs. It was a commercial disaster. The rocker failure taught Apple a hard lesson. By outsourcing the hardware, they had lost control of the user experience. To get it right, they would have to build the phone themselves. But even then, Apple wasn't inventing from scratch. Pocket-sized computers with touchscreens had been a reality for a decade, pioneered by devices like the Palm Pilot. Even the idea of a mobile app ecosystem wasn't new. In Japan, the iMode platform was already a massive success, with millions of people downloading content and software to their phones years before the iPhone existed. Even the core revolutionary technology, the multi-touch screen, wasn't an Apple invention. They quietly acquired a company called Fingerworks, which had developed the tech to help people with carpal tunnel syndrome work without pain. What actually made the device possible at that specific time was the convergence of high-speed 3G networks and the falling cost of Wi-Fi, providing the data speeds necessary for real web browsing. The iPhone was an act of technological convergence. Apple's contribution wasn't discovering new laws of physics, but assembling existing breakthroughs into a single, polished package. Assembling those pieces required a brutal internal struggle known as Project Purple. Two teams were forced to compete, one trying to adapt the iPod's click wheel for a phone, and another developing the new multi-touch interface. After months of development, Jobs made the call to kill the click wheel prototype, even though it was closer to being finished. He chose the more difficult, unproven path of touch. Yet, despite this bold choice, Jobs was actually against the feature that would eventually define the phone. He didn't want third-party apps on the device, fearing they would compromise security or crash the operating system. He spent months resisting pressure from the developers and his own board members. It took over a year of lobbying before he finally agreed to release the developer tools that made the App Store possible. The App Store, the most culturally defining part of the iPhone, only exists because the lone genius was eventually talked into admitting he was wrong. We're left with a device that was built out of fear, using technology Apple didn't invent, featuring an app store the CEO didn't want. And yet, the iPhone is a masterpiece. This suggests that Steve Jobs' actual role was that of a master editor. His talent lay in curation, the ability to say no to 1,000 distractions while protecting a single coherent user experience. This was his whole widget philosophy, the requirement that Apple control the hardware, the software, and the services together. By fusing these three blocks into a seamless whole, they could guarantee a level of quality no other company could match. Jobs applied this philosophy to his business deals too. He negotiated an unprecedented contract with AT&T that gave Apple absolute control over the phone's interface, breaking a power dynamic that had existed in the telecom industry for decades. Real innovation is a process of integration. It is the ruthless discipline required to take existing pieces, kill the bad ideas, and conduct a talented orchestra until every element works in perfect harmony.